Humans have a strange way of naming things. When they don't understand why you do something, they call it stupid. When they don't see the danger yet, they call you overreacting. And when you're a 200-pound cane Corso with paws like shovels and a brain that never stops scanning the wind, they call you dramatic. That's what my family said the first time I started digging behind the house. It was early in the rainy season. The air smelled heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. I could taste minerals in the wind coming from the hills and the creek line beyond our fence. The ground was already soft under my pads, and the backyard had that faint, sour, sweet scent of standing water that hasn't arrived yet but is thinking about it. My humans were busy inside. The little ones were laughing, the kettle was singing, and my favorite human, let's call him Dad, was doing that thing where he tries to fix 3 problems at once and ends up with sawdust in his hair. Normal day. But my instincts kept nudging me like a nose to the ribs. I walked the yard in slow loops, sniffing the same stretch of earth near the back wall. The soil there slanted slightly toward the house. I noticed it for months, especially after small storms when the water would pool for a few minutes before sinking away. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone would worry about. Except I worry for a living. I'm not a pet, not in my head. I'm a guardian of patterns. I memorize sounds, shadows, and slopes. I remember where water likes to travel and where strangers might step. I store the whole property in my chest like a map made of emotion. And that slope, it was wrong. So I started digging. Big, confident scoops. Dirt flew. Roots snapped. I wasn't playing. I was building a plan I couldn't explain in human words. I was making a trench wide enough to guide water away, deep enough to give it direction. Dad came outside when he heard the noise. "What are you doing, Brutus?" he asked. "That's not my real name, but you get the energy." I kept digging. He laughed. The kind laugh. The one that says, "You're silly, but I love you." Then Mom came out, hands on hips. The kids followed like curious birds. "Look at this hole," one of them said. "He's making a crater." "Maybe he's hiding treasure," another joked. Dad sighed. "He'll get tired." I didn't. By late afternoon, I'd shaped a shallow channel that angled toward the side yard, then down toward the lowest corner of the property where the grass thinned and the soil drank faster. I wasn't finished, but I'd started a path. Mom tried to block it with a board. I moved to another spot and kept working. Dad finally took the shovel from the shed, not to stop me, but to make it safer. He widened the edges so the kids wouldn't trip. He said it more for me than for them. "It's still a stupid hole," he muttered, half smiling as he worked. I leaned my shoulder into his leg, forgiving him for the word. That night the sky turned the color of bruised steel. The first drops were gentle. Then they multiplied into a steady drumming that made the windows hum. I rested by the back door, ears tuned to every change in the storm's rhythm. Water finds truth quickly. It doesn't care about opinions. I watched the yard darken, the soil saturate, the shallow pools attempt to form along the slope. Then something beautiful happened. The water reached my trench and abated. Instead of pushing straight toward the foundation, it slipped into the channel and moved sideways, away from the house, following the route I'd carved like a quiet promise. I barked once, softly, just to tell the storm I was paying attention. Dad opened the door, flashlight in hand. The kids peered around his legs. "Hey, look at that," he said. Mom's voice was lower. "Is it actually working?" I didn't need applause, but I'll admit my tale had its own opinion. All night, I listened to the rain and the movement of water in my little system. Not perfect, not pretty, but purposeful. By morning, the yard looked like a battlefield of mud. And my stupid hole, was now a real drainage path. Dad scratched my neck the way he does when he knows a truth landed late. "Good boy," he said. I closed my eyes because sometimes victory is quiet and warm. But the real test hadn't arrived yet. Humans love small proofs. A puddle drains faster, and they nod politely. A gutter stops dripping, and they declare the problem solved. But the sky had other plans. 3 days later, the forecast on Dad's phone made everyone nervous. I don't read screens, but I read humans. His shoulders tightened. Mom started moving things off the garage floor. The kids were told to keep their boots by the door. I patrolled the backyard in the early afternoon, before the storm arrived. My trench was still there, but the sides had softened. The channel needed reinforcement. So I did what any responsible, allegedly dramatic guardian would do. I dug again. I deepened the line where the slope was steepest and widened the section that fed into the side yard. I also scratched out a small basin near the lowest corner, an overflow pocket, so the water would have a place to rest instead of surging back uphill. Dad came out with a shovel this time without laughing. "All right, engineer," he said. "Show me your blueprint." He helped me shape the flow. He used old bricks to line one edge and a piece of leftover landscaping fabric to keep the channel from collapsing too quickly. Mom brought a bucket of gravel we planned to use for a garden project. The kids handed stones like a tiny construction crew. I supervised with the dignity of a foreman, who was also a dog. By dusk, the wind was sharp. The clouds rolled in low and fast. Then the rain hit like a door kicked open. It wasn't the friendly kind. It was the kind that turns streets into rivers and makes trees lean as if they're listening for instructions. The creek beyond the fence began to roar. Water started pouring down the hill behind our property in thick sheets. That's when I smelled the danger I'd been worried about. The ground uphill was too saturated. The runoff was too strong. If it reached our back wall all at once, it could press against the foundation, creep into vents, and flood the lower rooms. We'd seen pictures of that kind of disaster on the news. Families carrying boxes through ankle-deep water, kids crying over soaked toys, that heavy silence afterward. Not my family. Not this house. I stood in the rain with Dad under the porch light as we watched the yard transform. The first wave of runoff tried to cut straight toward the house. Then it met our channel. The water curved, collected, and streamed sideways like it had been waiting for permission. It rushed along the brick-lined edge, slid over the gravel, and poured into the overflow basin. The basin filled and released the excess toward the side yard and down to the lowest corner. It wasn't just a hole anymore. It was a system. Mom opened the back door, just enough to shout over the storm. "It's not pooling by the wall." Dad nodded slowly, eyes wide with that mix of relief and disbelief humans get when nature chooses not to be cruel. Inside, the kids were safe, warm, and loudly unimpressed by the idea that their dog had just designed basic civil engineering. The storm lasted hours. At one point, the power flickered. The wind screamed. The rain tried to erase our work. But the channel held. When morning finally arrived, the neighborhood looked exhausted. The street down the block had a shallow washout. A few yards had turned into muddy ponds. Someone's fence had tipped. Our house? Dry. Dirty outside, yes. The yard was a mess of leaves, twigs, and heroic mud. But the foundation was clear. The lower rooms smelled like coffee, not damp carpet. Dad knelt in the grass and put his forehead against mine. "You saved us," he whispered. I don't know if a dog can feel pride the way humans do, but I know I felt purpose. I felt like every watchful night, every patrol around the fence, every instinct that people can't see was finally translated into something they could measure. Later that day, Dad installed a proper French drain and extended a downspout to connect with the path I'd started. He said the words out loud so everyone would hear them. Turns out his stupid hole was the smartest idea on the property. The kids cheered. Mom laughed. I accepted my rewards. Ear scratches, a bigger breakfast, and the quiet honor of being trusted. So if you ever see a big dog digging with serious eyes, don't assume he's bored. Sometimes we're just listening to the weather before you have to.